I'm pretty sure you know this, but there are times that when in attempt to help someone, we actually hurt them. I mean, it's possible to have a sincere motive to want to help people, but what we do about that motive may not produce what we hoped it would produce. Okay, it comes. Here's a pretty simple example of that. It's not, in some ways, it's a very complex example, but this part of it is fairly simple. When an addict or an alcoholic is not helped in the right kind of way, they don't get better at all. And often, early, before the addicted or alcoholic person really decides that they're ready to turn from that life and turn toward a life of sobriety, a lot of the people in their lives are they think they're trying to help. So they're being, they cover their tracks for them. They clean up their messes for them. They wouldn't ever say or do things that would be mean toward that person. And as a result, a good motive turns out to produce a not good outcome, in that until life gets difficult, so that turning away from this addicted lifestyle to a sober life something has to happen for that decision to be made. And usually it has to do with the negative consequences that catch up to the addict or the alcoholic. Family members and friends want to keep that person from being hurt. A good motive, but as they do what they can to hold back the consequences, it doesn't help. So now what in the world has that got to do with what we talked about last time from Psalm 15, the idea that a person with this character profile lends money to the poor without interest? Now, I don't want to be misunderstood here. I'm not being political. Now, I'm sure there are political implications to what I say, and so because of that, I will issue this disclaimer. I'm conservative, and if you are not conservative, then you and I may not be on the same page with what I'm going to talk about. I alluded yesterday or last time to the idea that government programs, first of all, let me just say, I don't think government programs are evil, but I think they often don't accomplish what they could, what they should, what they were intended for. And sometimes it's because of a misunderstanding of human nature and life, in my opinion. All right. In specific, I'm talking about a welfare system that, if it did what it is intended to do, would be awesome and wonderful. If it was possible for the government to lift people out of poverty and set them in a place where they could live a life of contribution and productivity, where they and their children would be set up for a good life, that would be a very good thing. In my opinion, that's not what's happening with most of what goes on in our welfare system. And here's why. Because our welfare system doesn't lend money to the poor at no interest. It gives money and benefits at no cost. The difficulty, in my opinion, is that when things happen for us and to us at no cost, they're not very highly motivational after a brief period at the beginning. So I think what David is talking about in Psalm 15 would be a fabulous welfare approach. Now, I'm not talking about people whose legitimate need is for an infusion of cash resources, food, shelter, the primary basic needs, because they simply can't produce. They're incapable of producing. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about the majority of, as I understand it, and I think statistics bear out, the majority of people who receive these benefits who could work but don't, because it's more beneficial and more financially beneficial to not work. If as they work, these benefits reduce. That makes sense to me. But there's little, if any, incentive to go to work to produce, contribute, improve their own lives. Now, I'm not talking racially, because this is not purely a racial issue. I'm not talking about one political party over another, because it is not simply political. What I am talking about is a confused value system that, instead of empowering people to step into a phase of life where their gifts and talents can be applied for, again, I'll use these words, for productivity and contribution. I wonder if it were possible to make loans to the poor without charging interest, and then see what might happen as they begin to step into the responsibility for their own life's outcomes. The truth is, there is a movement in the among the poor in the world that has gained tremendous traction and has worked astoundingly well, which pretty much does this. It's called the microloan movement. All right. I'm hearing myself say these things and thinking, okay, you are very far afield from a Bible study. It's time to shut up about this. I will say one more thing. If you're interested in the microloan movement, it is well worth doing some exploration for. Some fabulous things are being done, and people are being empowered out of their poverty. And this is especially true in the poorest places in the world. Unfortunately, our culture doesn't doesn't work with microloans well, and there are many reasons for this, and I'm not going to get into it. Okay, stop it. Move on to the Bible. Okay, who lends money to the poor without interest? What's the bottom line on this? Generosity. Generosity should mark every follower of Jesus. And if generosity doesn't mark us, then there's a legitimate question about our discipleship. Now, generosity can mean many different things. It can mean financial generosity. I think sometimes we think we have to be extravagantly generous financially for it to count, for it to matter. I don't believe that's true. Let me just give you a teeny tiny little piece. Generally, a 15 to 18% tip is considered acceptable at a restaurant. And what if you bump that to 20%? It's 2% more, and I mean, you'd have to have a pretty big meal for that to make more than $1 difference in the tip. Isn't that a way to express generosity. But it's not like leaving. I'd love to be able to leave a $50 tip for a $40 meal. It would. I'd love to have the resources for that. But in my current situation, that would, I think, be irresponsible. But for me to leave a 20% tip when only a 15% tip is generally expected, that's generosity. Here's another thing. When you're done with something, an item, you could sell it on eBay or on the marketplace or whatever, and there's nothing at all wrong with that. But you could also give it to somebody who can actually use it. There are ways to be generous. And followers of Jesus look for ways to be generous. And one of this expression here is lending money to the poor without interest. Has to do with I want to make a better life and situation possible for you. And one of the ways I could do this is by loaning you money without interest. Okay, generosity. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is fabulous generosity and 1 is, well, it's Scrooge from The Christmas Carol, where you just pinch every penny and resent turning loose of any of it. Where do you see yourself? It would be a good thing for all of us, me at the front of the line, to set ourselves up and to make our objective that this week we will turn loose of things and become, even if it's only a tiny bit more generous, that we'd be more generous. In a world full of generous people, many, many good things happen. Many, many lives are restored and helped and encouraged and built up. Are you generous with your time? Are you generous with your possessions? Are you generous with your money? Are you generous with your knowledge? There are many ways that you can show generosity. And followers of Jesus are marked. One of the marks of a follower of Jesus is consistent generosity. Then David goes on, who not only do they lend money to the poor without interest, but they do not accept a bribe against the innocent. Wow. I don't ever remember having been offered a bribe against the innocent. I've been on one jury, which totally surprised me because at the time I was a full-time minister. I believe in the death penalty. I have biblical values, and to be honest, most defense attorneys don't want that kind of guy on a jury. They want somebody who's got a much more open mind. But I was put on a jury once, and only once, and nobody attempted to bribe me. I don't know how in my normal execution of life I encounter not accepting a bribe for the innocent. All right, but I do think there is this. One of the points of that I see is we treat people justly. The innocent are provided for. The guilty are punished. That's the most basic bottom line of justice. What can I do to provide justice? What can I do to ensure that the innocent are not punished? This doesn't even imply, I don't think even remotely, that part of my job is taking care of the innocent so that the guilty can be punished. That's not what this is about. This is about the innocent. And it's a big enough subject. You got it. I'm going to have to come back to it next time. And I know that for a lot of us, it kind of is a little bit of a reach to think about, when am I ever going to have to turn out a bribe for the innocent? Well, we'll do some more thinking about that next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.